We are told to start because this is Germany, huh? So we start in time. So thank you for everyone who is coming here. So we will join the session. So we have a very interesting panel before us, probably one of the most political sensitive issues today in the world of science and technology, which is, as it is written there, international research cooperation, but that's a very neutral description. What it is actually about is how can we keep the business of science and research, which is by default open and global, how can we keep it open and global in a world where increasingly they are being instrumentalized for national interest, for sovereignty issues, for security issues. So it's a hot potato. It's a difficult question where I'm sure we will get some very interesting viewpoints today, because we have an atypical panel from representatives at the highest level in the ministries of science and technology, research and so on, from 3 countries, Poland, Czechia and Mexico. It's not the usual suspects that you find on these debates. These are the countries that are also upcoming in the rankings and so on. So they have a different and interesting perspective on it. So I will quickly introduce the 3 speakers. So we have Andrej Septičky from thank you, from the Under Secretary of State. Am I correct? Yes, of the Ministry of Science and Education in Poland. Thank you for coming here. We have Jana Havlikova, also Under Secretary from the Ministry of Science, Research and Innovation from the Czech Republic. And finally, we have Violeta Vázquez Rocha Maldonado from the Mexican Ministry or Secretariat of Science, Humanity. That's interesting. Humanities, Technology and Innovation. So also an Undersecretary of State. So a very prestigious and high-level panel who are actually on a daily basis in the business of making science policy. Now, myself, I spent half of my life at the university and the other half in the European Commission, working on international science collaboration around certain topics. So I have a keen interest in this myself. And I'm very looking forward to the dialogue and the commentaries of the colleagues here. 3 lines to put it into perspective. 10 years ago, the European Commission launched its gigantic new program, Horizon, which is 100 billion of science, under the slogan, open science, open innovation, open to the world. I'm sure our representatives of Europe remember that. And that was then the hype of the day. Hundreds of meetings, G7, G20, OECD, it was all going in the same direction. How can we increase openness? How can we collaborate more? How can we even create a system whereby patents are being openly shared because it's better for science and so forth? 10 years later, less than 10 years later, the political atmosphere has completely changed. Now the debates are, how can we create a system that respects sovereignty? What does that mean, sovereignty? Does it mean nationalism? How can we create a system that is also useful for security? Or how can we actually let prevail security over openness? Because everything is a potential weapon, everything is a potential a threat for security, so everything should be then under security regulations, which I personally find a very strange way of thinking, because a knife can not only cut a cake, but also can kill someone. So should we stop research into knives? And that is really a very strange thing. And the whole idea of sovereignty, and it's important to recall this here in Berlin, falling walls, and the wall fell 9 November 1989. Now, the most sovereign scientific systems ever in the world were the communist countries. They had the worst science ever. If you look at the rankings, if you look at their output, it was the worst of the worst, except for mathematics. So you really have, I'm puzzled to see now, and now I will immediately give the floor to our colleagues. I'm puzzled to understand how come that the policy and the politics and the discourse goes in that direction. And then secondly, but we come back to that, what can we do about it? So first of all, let me start with the ladies. In your own country, how is this debate, openness, collaboration versus security and sovereignty, how is it perceived? What are the tendencies in your country? And how do you look at it as someone who is in charge of making the policy? So Violeta, if you don't mind.
Well, in Mexico, Mexico is one of the first countries to ever mention the human right to science in its very constitution. So we do think of science as a public good, and knowledge in general as a public good, and the responsibility of the state is to guarantee access to its benefits. However, we also, as a nation that has suffered from dependency for many years, are seeking for a more sovereign approach to technology and science. But by sovereignty, we mean something very particular. It means our own way of standing towards the world with integrity. We think that the opposite of sovereignty is not the opposite of collaboration, let's say, is dependency, not independence. And that science is, by definition, international and also collaborative. So we do seek for cooperation, and actually one of the efforts that we are making since the Ministry of Science started this year is to look abroad and to start and renew our collaboration with other countries, but also to stand in a way that guarantees that we develop our own technology, that we can collaborate in order for there to be transfer of knowledge between the countries, and especially with a policy that is very emphatic on reciprocity. And that would be a way to conceive a collaboration.
Good points, and we come back to the reciprocity in a second. Jana, please.
I think we are facing, the same challenges, and we are trying to find answers to the same questions. How to balance all these principles, which could seem that they are contradictory, And, that's the life. It's about dynamics in life. Maybe, 10 years ago, we've just have imagined that the world would look a little bit different as it is now. So we have to be prepared for, every these questions. In Czechia, we've just launched a new law on research, and we just tried to tackle all these questions within. So there is, really strong focus on internationalization, on the collaboration, on ethics and standards, how to conduct research, and also, the things I would say security interests of the state. And, our, recipe would be maybe shared responsibility, between researchers, research organizations, the providers of support, ministries, and a little bit of common sense.
Yes, that's a good one. Andre, please.
Well, I don't think there is a contradiction between science, open science, and security, because what we've been doing for last years, it's making science for security reasons. Think about COVID and cooperation on that topic. Think about Russian full-scale aggression. We as Poland, we've launched some projects with our neighbors, with especially the Baltic states. Impress EU, it was co-financed by American National Science Foundation. Polish Academy of Sciences had a project on PTSD in Ukraine, which was co-financed by National Academy of Sciences from the US. Security challenges, like any other challenges, need a response from scientific community, and we do cooperate on that. By the way, EU has been doing the same. Think about PESCO and all the defense-related projects. It's maybe less basic science, more applied research projects, anti-torpedo systems, whatever. But still, this is money we put together to have more efficient investments. PESCO was launched some 8 years ago, and now, even under New Horizon Europe, for the first time, we are discussing to include double-use technologies and even some defense-related projects within the new FP10. So simply, we are living in the times where we need cooperation scientific cooperation in the security-related areas.
Yeah, indeed, but is the key issue then not? It's not a black or white issue, which was the communist countries I was referring to 30 years ago. Was we do everything ourselves, and the rest of the world doesn't want to collaborate with us. So, but now it's more. Where do we draw the lines then? Because when is something dual use? Anything can be dual use. Huh? The knife can be a dual use. So where do we draw the lines, and how to translate that into an international principle of collaboration? Is that not the key problem to tackle politically?
Well, I do believe the key question would be rather how many knives and how many forks we need. This is what we've been saying as Poland during these initial negotiations on the FP10. We are in favor of double-use technologies within the new FP program for obvious reasons. We are neighbors of both Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, but we want to be certain that some part of money will be kept also for non-dual use traditional science, not to get everything involved. So what we would fear is rather securitization of the entire science. Part of it needs to be securitized because we live in, once again, quite challenging times, but please keep some money for traditional scientific projects. I think this is the key point I would make on that topic.
And from your perspective, Violetta and Jana?
No, as I already mentioned, it's to use a bit of common sense. We really do trust our researchers, our research organizations, that on their level they could, make some decisions from the experience, from a cooperation with their colleagues from abroad. And that they are able to do, I would say, for example, a risk assessment if there should be a new cooperation, just really a little bit to know the people I would work with.
I'd say we have to acknowledge when our national challenges, which are of priority to us and to focus their lines of research, are also regional and global challenges. And to that extent, the solutions have to be also collaborative within the region or within the global community overall. I am thinking, for instance, in terms of security, we have a very strong concern about food security, for instance, and we need to secure that our country is self-sufficient in, let's say, corn production. But we know that this is a concern for most countries in our region. So in that way, we need to ensure we have a concern on certain kind of security, but we also have this shared concern among the countries of the region, and that is a perfect environment to cooperate. And also some other global challenges like climate change. We have to acknowledge that we are not the only ones affected by it, right? So I think instead of more than drawing the line, I would say, where do we actually open the barriers, or where do we build the bridges? And I think as long as we realize that we are all affected by same kind of problems, we're going to try to find joint solutions.
Indeed, and by the way, there will be room for Q&A later on, so don't worry about that. But the point there is so from a national point of view, it seems quite clear that your policy is clever and on the spot. But how do we translate that in an international context? Because science is international, and you gave the example of climate change. I mean, there are some countries where the leadership no longer believes in climate change. Said it's a hoax. So. And my university, my ex-university, because I'm retired, my university, all the funds are stopped that are related to it because of that certain country no longer believing. Can you imagine that you believe in the fact? It's like I believe in gravity. Huh? So how do we translate that into this new reality, and how can we bypass this kind of quite stupid attitudes towards science?
There's
Internationally speaking, not nationally.
I have 2 points there. The first one is we have to look for strategic allies, right? We have to try to collaborate with those who are like-minded and not with others who might be in opposition to what science has already demonstrated. It's not a matter of belief. But also, I think that academic communities are different from governments. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. But academic communities are more consistent in, that through different administrations, and they are also more consistent in what they believe and what they foster and what they stand for. So I do think that the collaboration has to be focused not among governments, but also among academic institutions. And that's what would guarantee that, for instance, we can collaborate with some academic institutions, even in countries whose leaders might not be akin to our point of view.
Andre, Jana, would you like to comment on that? Because it's an important point, huh?
Yeah, certainly. The fact that some people don't believe in climate change or vaccinations or whatever
Exactly.
is a major challenge. What do we have to do? Certainly, we have to actively fight on different levels and through different means disinformation. As this concerns national levels, this concerns also European international level, fighting fake theses, but also coping with new instruments disinformation is using. This concerns in particular now AI, we have the AI Act and so on. Second point is we have to become independent on regional levels from some of our partners who stopped believing in climate change. I don't know how about Mexican science, but European science is strongly dependent on different levels on our American partners. Just to give you one example, we are assessing each other, I mean the scientists, using largely English-speaking services like Scopus. Okay, so to assess a German scholar coming to Poland or to assess a Polish scholar coming to Germany, you will start by using an American service to see how many citations he or she has. So if our American partners become unreliable on different levels, we have to look for European solutions, European systems, European databases, citations, whatever, simply to stay independent and objective based on science, not on some superstitions.
Yeah, maybe if I could add just to follow these comments, maybe it's about infrastructure more in general. It's about data systems, it's about people, it's about institutions. If it will be robust enough in Europe, then that makes more sense to cooperate with other regions, other continents, and things like this. And it's about just to find a family of willing. Yes.
No, absolutely. And what you just said now is something close to my own heart and past. I really think that an element that is missing in the debate is how can we guarantee that the basic components of science, which is data, remain common good freely or accessible. Maybe not for free in financial terms, but at least accessible. Because what we see happening now is that some countries suddenly starting to believe something different. They cut down the access to the data or destroy it. So can we come up, if we want to guarantee international collaboration on a reciprocal basis to the benefit of everyone, we must make sure that the data remain accessible in one way or another. And I really think we need to reinvent how we manage that, because now it is stored in 2 or 3 companies who happen to be in the same country and who happen to do everything they can to please the person who no longer believes in climate change. So what can we do there as countries that don't belong to that country? Let's guess which country it is. If you know it, you win a prize. Maybe Andrei, can you start?
This is another element of this dependence, which I have mentioned, very crucial one. Data. We are having instruments on that in Europe, maybe limited, but still they are there. We have the European Open Science Cloud, which is an initiative addressed at networking European countries, member states' databases. So that's one point. We have the FAIR principle, so the data from research projects financed, for example, from Polish sources, now have to be fair, so findable, reachable, accessible, interoperational, and so on. So we have right ideas, we have some instruments, but now the key point is to persuade, the users probably, to move some key data from that other country you mentioned to this side of the Atlantic. Or maybe even, this is especially important in case of AI, we are using more and more different AI systems, but on the other hand, we are this is very important to protect our data. So probably in future we will be using not online AI systems, but locally based at your home institution, at your home university, because this will be the best way to protect data without sending it outside, okay?
But then comes into play, if I may, the principle of reciprocity. Huh? I understand it, and I think it is clever, but that means that if you want my data, also my country, I also want to be able to access yours. So there is an element of reciprocity then that has to come into play. And then how do you define it?
I would say data, we have principles also for that, okay? Data should be, for example, anonymized. If we are speaking, for example, about medical-related issues, certainly you need to know for research what are the relations between whatever medicaments you have prescribed and the change of health situation. But you want the name of the patient to be erased, okay? So anonymized data should be reachable, but personal data, especially under European regulations on that, should be, once again, fully anonymized, and it combines, what you mentioned, open science on one hand, and security of our personal data on the other hand. This is feasible, okay? It's maybe complicated, but we have rules how this should be done, and we just need to apply them.
Yes, no, but it is. I think you're right. It is complicated but feasible. Violetta, you wanted to come in.
I think that the problem of sharing not only data but also results, which is science has to do not only with data but also with analyzing those data with certain frameworks and certain rigor that ensures replicability and transparency and etc. So it is not first of all, there is of course a matter of infrastructure that I think states should provide, or at least public agencies. But I also think that we are on the face of a problem. I think a wider problem is not just about nations or countries, but it's about privatizing what should be public knowledge into, and getting it behind paywalls and making it a benefit of corporations from any country we are talking about. So I think that is the aim we should, that's what we should aim for public-founded research to stay public, not only in their data, but also in the results, also even in the topics that they choose to do research on. They have to be pertinent to society, they have to be collaborative, and etc. So I think it's there is also a challenge in not privatizing what is funded by public money.
That's another hot potato, indeed, Jana.
Yeah, it's about the role of private subject in the global system of science research and innovation. And to the terms of reciprocity, it's just necessary to create a situation of a win-win solution. If everybody can then, if everybody willing, will be able to identify with the aim and with the activities. And maybe we will be not able to, to find a global and easy solution in just 1 or 2 steps. Maybe we should just, start with what we have in our hands, as Andrei already said. There are some principles, there are some rules, so we have to analyze them, in this new or change perspective, and make it from the best for us.
So that's you're actually hinting at the coalition of the willing, and let's start with those who want, and then forget those for the moment.
It's not about forgetting,
No, but put it
on less on lefting behind. Just we have to start with something. So we have to start with some construction.
And it would be a very good idea, because I what you said about private science and privately funded science and public, in the 50s, when the science system more or less started, 2/3 was financed by public, 1/3 was financed by private. Now it's the other way around. So most of the science is actually funded privately, if you look at it globally. Yeah? So if you look at it from that point of view, then it certainly makes a very important point, so that not only that the results of publicly funded science remain public, but also that of private science, because if we see at everything that happens in AI, the ground was laid by public system for 40 years. It is the Commission, national ministries who fund it. And now the low-hanging fruits, which are enormous, are being taken by some companies, and they do most of the science now. And there we have how to find a balance there to make sure that the development not only goes in the direction of the companies is really difficult. So how this coalition of the willing, and that's my last question before I give it to the floor. How could we make that happen? So coalition of the willing for a global commons on science. Let's put it this way. Where would you start? You have 3 minutes.
Well, I would say that even within the EU, we don't have a common education policy. So our actions are based on the will of the member states. And we have instruments which work quite well. European Alliance Universities, the already mentioned framework program, and so on. So what we need money. This is always the most tricky question at any level. But we need also instruments like, Horizon Europe, but also Erasmus program. By the way, Erasmus program started from European students, then it was opened to other non-member states, to other professional groups. That's a very good example of how a good idea, quoting the functionalist theory, spills over. We have the European Universities Alliances, which also have some partners out of the European Union. So money, instruments, but last but not least, political will. Scholars, researchers, at least those who are financed from public funds, maybe there are also some scholars like from the, movies where you have a bad scholar who just wants, to produce something to destroy the world. I'm joking. But I mean, most of the scholars are open-minded because that's how science works. So they want to cooperate worldwide to promote science. They just need politicians to support them.
Oh, but your role is essential. Sorry to interrupt. Your role is essential because if policy creates the game, and scientists will follow it, and you cannot expect scientists to become politicians. So it is really up to you who are in power to do it in that direction. And
we are trying to do our best, I suppose.
no, absolutely. And the power of policy is gigantic. If you look at the US now, where you see what we don't want to see from policy. Jana, on what are the first steps for...
just really to analyze what we already have in our hands. And, maybe to reshape it a little bit. Who knows? And then just to find another people of friends who are willing to cooperate on this idea, maybe to just consider it as a project.
Okay.
I think this panel is a very good example of what has to be done. Like, you have to bring together what you call the not usual suspects. Like, we have to look for allies in those places where you wouldn't usually look for.
Yes.
And I think that work has already been undertaken by our scholar community. Everywhere you go, you can find a national scholar working somewhere else, because scholars are our best diplomats and our best ambassadors. So what I think the policymakers should do is keep track of that community and try to build a network with them, so that they are not just lost together, lost alone, but actually bring them together to build this collaboration and capacities, because it's already there, as Jana just said. We just need to strengthen it.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's now look at the room. Are there people who would like to come in? I see someone. Well, we have microphone managers. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. My name is Annette Röttger. I'm coming from Physikalisch-Technische Bundesanstalt, and I have a question where we draw the line in cooperation. So I would like to explain it a little bit, because I'm coming from the area of metrology. The Meter Convention has at adversary 150 years. This is where we still cooperate, every country. And if you think it's boring to define meter, kilogram, and second, the second brings you here. This is geopositioning. But geopositioning is a knife, as you mentioned. It's also military use.
Yeah.
So where do we draw the line in cooperation? Is it the technology readiness level, or can you give us a key on this?
Easy question.
Well, I would say there is certainly one line which is quite visible in several countries. This is the issue we haven't still touched upon. This is the question of migration. I mean, cooperation means mobility. Mobility of people within EU, let's say, but also mobility of people from outside the EU, and especially when this concerns students. This sometimes in some countries becomes a political problem. And you have countries which, including my own, which now tend to reduce the students' migrations, uncontrolled, let's say, student mobility, especially from out of EU, because we do believe that quality of people and also the geographical origins sometimes matters, okay? Because we have people who come to EU not really to study, but just to get here. So this is probably one of the answers, maybe not the only one, but the first one which comes to my mind when we speak about some red lines.
You know, I would do it, evidence and experience based. I really quite trust people that they are, quite competent to do what's necessary to do. I know, because there is no an easy answer to this question.
No. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the panel. That's for sure. But it is a legitimate question, and because it's on the table now.
I think it depends on the discipline, and maybe each discipline would come up with a different answer to it. Like, I think in the humanities there should be no boundary at all. That's what I think, because I come from the humanities. But in some other more strategic areas, there might be a more defined limit to collaboration or to secrecy or not. Yeah.
Yes, 1, 2, 3, okay, 4, 5, stop. There was someone there.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Thank you for this very illuminating talk. My name is Hamid Aboud. I'm from Mexico, but I am a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Heidelberg. My question has to do more with the issue of ideology. So in concrete, we're talking a lot about cooperation here, but we're seemingly neglecting both citizen science and indigenous knowledge. So how can we integrate different epistemologies and their corresponding ontologies into this cooperation to acknowledge their value? Thank you.
Well, I think that I'm going to take the word because I think in Mexico that is not a foreign topic to us. We have a policy that is very related to communities in general, and to foster the collaboration between indigenous people, for instance, or but not only indigenous peoples, but in general non-academic communities with the academic community. Just to give you an example, in order for us to design our strategic calls this year, we organized forums with, let's say, if the topic is linguistic diversity, then we organize those forums with different sorts of speakers and see what has been done, because those are the ones who have who have the experience on policies that have worked and policies that haven't worked. So in order to advance knowledge, you have to actually call for the subjects involved and to build and try to identify the gaps and fill them in. So I think, and that is part of, we don't call it that way, but that is part of open science, right? The involvement of society and of the agents that are directly affected by the knowledge or lack of it thereof.
Thank you. If no one, if
You
you
know,
want to come in,
maybe I just would say, for me, it's not only about building skills, but about building capacities. It's more complex issue.
yes, and you know, we have to accept that the perfect world
Yeah.
doesn't exist, but let's try to get there. There was another question. Yes, there, please. And two of you and you.
Thank you very much. I'm Nestor from Spring and Nature. And again, amazing panel, amazing topics for discussion. I know it's very hard to address these topics at the moment. And the question I have, I think it's very hard to have sovereignty and if we have dependencies, right? If we depend on certain countries, and it's the same question that was asked there, but on a different part. How do we draw the line with those, with our allies, right? So let's say that the country is reducing the rights of minorities, reducing mass deportations, reducing the rights of women. They cannot have abortions at the state, at the federal level. Is that something that could make them be less of an ally? Or only if they decide to invade Greenland, right, they will become less of an ally. So is there, if we have a dependency at the science level with certain allies, can we say at some point, okay, you're not allies anymore, right? You decide to stay more than your mandate, a third mandate, a fourth mandate, or you decide to invade Greenland. Where do we draw the line regarding the allies that we have for science, right, for cooperation?
Anyone wants to comment on that?
Well, I would give two answers to your question. We as Poland, we have clearly drawn a red line in 2022 when the full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine started. We've ended all the cooperation, scientific cooperation with Russia. Russia and US is not the same, I know, on different levels, but still we fully ended the cooperation with Russia. We've also promoted the ending of cooperation between Russia and other institutions like CERN, for example, in Geneva. So this is first answer. Second answer is, if you look at the rules of current Horizon, basically Horizon is open to everybody, but there are some especially sensitive topics which are only opened to the members of the common market, full stop. Not about, you know, invading Greenland or ethnic cleansings or whatever, but simply there are some areas. There's also an element to the first question which was asked. There are some areas we believe to be so critical, so sensitive, we don't want third countries to get money and to get a look into it, full stop.
I would say just what I said before, that even though collaboration, like the instruments are signed among politicians or policymakers or political leaders, science is done by scholars. And in that way, I don't think there is a scholar of some part of the world you don't want to interact with because he belongs to a country whose leader believes in such and such. So as long as we keep the tight connections between academic institutions and scholars, we can, evade that problem.
Yeah,
Here we don't agree, I think.
No,
Because I do believe that there are some countries, as I've mentioned, starting from the Russian Federation, you cannot cooperate with, even with the scientists, because there is no more free science there. And if you have the science itself, which is working for the totalitarian regime and its crimes against humanity, and it's disinformation. Unfortunately, you have to end the cooperation.
yeah, well, it's that we could explore for another hour, but I think the Russian case is, of course, relatively easy because all vice chancellors in Russia openly supported, in an open letter, Putin. So
If you don't support, you leave the country.
That's it.
Russia.
But on the question of dependency, and then I give the floor. I mean, in my view, the best guarantee against dependency is open science. If during COVID every country would have had to find its own vaccine based on its own investment, most countries would not have had a vaccine. It's only because we worked together, we pooled the data, we pooled the science, that we were able as a scientific community to go very quick there. There are two questions here and one here. Yes, go ahead, you have the microphone.
Thank you very much for your discussion. My name is Björn Hoops. I'm a professor of sustainability law at the University of Groningen and a member of the Netherlands Young Academy. I'm curious about your vision on research funding. For a bit of background, we've had a largely dysfunctional government who's cut our education funding, and the dependence on external, so extra university funding, has become much worse. And my question would be, because I've kind of received contradictory signals. On the one hand, you've been stressing the autonomy and of researchers. On the other hand, we also want to steer researchers in a certain direction. So where should, well, most of the research funding come from? Like, should the university be equipped so much that any researcher can do what they want? Or should the emphasis be on programs like Horizon or the national funding organizations that can then give the money to the ones that meet their requirements the best?
You know, for me, it's about, I know it's easy to say, about a smart mixture of all of it, you know, because, you know, every money on the table has its own purpose, you know. It's I would say motivating or formatting in a little bit different direction. There is, you know, I hope out of discussion there must be public funds to support, you know, research and science at universities, research institutions, and so on. But also, you know, a little bit of competition, you know, just to just a little pressure to, you know, go forward and not just, you know, sit there and, you know, use the time as it is. It's also a part of this discussion, you know, and there is also a maybe difference between, I would say, fundamental research, you know, and then, you know, and the life cycle of research and technology. Maybe be then more pressure on the end phase of the research. Just, you know, that we need, you know, translation from results into practice.
I would say science, just as it's international and collaborative by definition, it's also free by definition. And so there has to be some freedom, a lot of freedom, towards basic science. But at the same time, I agree with Jana, there has to be a mixture of ways of funding, such that, because we have limited resources, unfortunately, we have to be strategic into where to focus some of these resources. And we have to identify what are the priorities, either regional, national, or global priorities in which we want to invest. But at the same time, we cannot just forget about freedom of research, because that's what guarantees advancement.
I would add two short remarks. First, when we are speaking about open science in a large sense, this also means that everybody should be able to do research, not only in the one country you have not mentioned. So we have to cope with this scientific innovation gap between the two sides of the Atlantic, but this also concerns, for example, the EU. Okay, coming two of us from Central Europe, we know very well that we have great scholars, but you've mentioned that we started from a different point. So that's why financing also should include this cohesion aspect, one of the values of the EU. And the second point is, speaking about the smart mix of different funds, smart mix also should be based, as far as possible, on some common requirements. I mean, we are having Horizon Europe, we are having Cohesion Fund, we are having private funds, national funds, my God. And every scholar or every researcher and innovator who wants to get money from all these funds needs to fill up, 4 or 5 grants with very different, sometimes contradictory criteria. This is very difficult, and it would be much easier if we find some common standards, requirements for different types of grants, at least at the EU level. I'm not sure how it could work once again over the Atlantic, I'm sorry, but this would make the life of people much easier. The money remains the same, okay? I mean, different sources of money, but at least it's much easier if you have a good idea. It's much easier to get this money. That's what we are having, by the way, with some European countries, the WEAVE program. You have up to 3 countries from up to 3 research groups from different countries, but only one leading agency which assesses the same project for 3 institutions, and this makes life much easier with the same money.
Yeah, so a kind of a global research council. That would be the ideal, huh?
At the end, yeah.
Yeah,
I think a coalition of willing.
I think scientifically it's a piece of cake to do it, but politically it's different. The last question over there, please.
So, Mohammed Shebani from Max Planck Institute, Magdeburg. So my question is, we say that it is international cooperations. We see that we always keep saying that it's open access, open knowledge, but we forget that is it basically the purpose of science for humanity development or nation development? Because now the research is led by military basically, and then we see some countries in Africa which is not developed, and you have countries which is very developed, and then with technology basically some big countries can pull some small countries, and we saw that around us right now everywhere, from the east to the west, from the north to the south. And so what is the meaning now of the open access, and where is the development basically? Is it nation, military, some group of people, or it is for all of us? And the responsible person about this basically is scientists, because scientists who create this technology, and it's not anymore natural becoming, it's more politics behind that, and it is more, for example, you said that we cut the research with Russia, right? But for other people, it's, now we make clusters basically. We make clusters and we have conflicts, and conflicts are fueling this research, and then you have very 2 clusters, maybe soon they will have 3 or 4 clusters even in Europe. So how we could solve this problem now when we have it just 1 clusters and development for humanity rather than people themselves?
Okay, well, that actually is a very nice way to frame the last question. What is the next thing, the next big step to take to break this kinds of the walls of science nationalism and go towards more global collaboration? The gentleman hinted in that direction. We start there.
I think we have to. I think we don't have a dilemma between human advancement and nation advancement. There are different kinds of national projects. There are more aggressive national projects, more aggressive nationalisms, and there are more progressive nationalisms. And I think in a way we don't have to pick one of them, humans or nations. If we pick the right kind of nationalism or the right kind of nation policy, we would avoid that dilemma. But the next steps, I think, are to strengthen cooperation and collaboration, but in a more reciprocal kind of
By the willing.
way.
Jana.
I will repeat a little bit myself, just really to analyze and collect what we've already had in our hands and do the best from it, just.
André.
I think the key answer is on different levels, science for all, which means everybody who has capacity should be allowed to do science wherever he or she lives. All the results, like with COVID you've mentioned, also should be available to everybody, because that's how our region, Europe, the world will have more cohesion, and we will advance together towards a better future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I close down, I invite all of you who is interested to join us in Davos, where we will create a house of science and precisely explore this issue of the coalition of the willing. But let me thank the three fantastic speakers. You really spoke not as a politician, I might say, but based on your political experience. And I think we got some very interesting clues there. So thank you very much, and have a nice day.